So I know that I said, God knows how many times, I wasn't going to do Madden videos this year. I wasn't going to get the game. Well, that's changed. So I did the game on EA Access and decided to do a series, at least for a few episodes, seeing how long it lasts. We're going to do a franchise. Now, the reason that I originally gave for not doing a franchise was someone else, a well-known YouTuber, was going to do the franchise with the team that I was going to do for franchise. But I'm still going to do that team, even though the other YouTuber is doing it as well, because I'm not doing mine really as a main series. It'll probably be like the third or fourth series on this channel at best, once all the other games come out, like NBA and NHL, especially NHL, in the fall. So let's get underway. We're going to talk about this team a little bit, New York Jets. So the New York Jets are my favorite team, and the big story that you kind of think about when you first think of the New York Jets is the situation at quarterback. It's a rough one. Geno Smith is going to be out for the first 8 games of the season with his jaw injury, and Ryan Fitzpatrick is a very up-and-down veteran, and Bryce Petty is a late-round pick who is very unproven at any sort of non-spread scheme. So we'll see how that whole situation pans out. That's really going to be one of the big things in this franchise if we get very far into it, is going to be drafting, most likely drafting and developing a quarterback, or just figuring out what is the solution at that position. And then at running back, almost at halfback, which in Madden it is, you have a trio of interesting players. You have Chris Ivory, Stephen Ridley, and Zach Stacy, as well as who's his face? Can't think of his name. Bilal Powell. You have Bilal Powell, the third down back. And Chris Ivory is your most likely player to start out of that group. And if you're not going to start him, I'd say probably Stephen Ridley is the most likely to get snaps after that. We're trying to figure out a way to get Zach Stacy involved, but his fumbling issues and his weird stats, like he has really high pass blocking, but his carrying is like really low. He's more of like a fullback, and that's a position that you could see him at in the future, but we'll see what we do with Zach Stacy. So that's the halfback position. Wide receiver, obviously you got Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker and Jeremy Curley, a trio of proven players. We also signed Earl Bennett for wide receiver depth because we only had 4 on the roster after preseason. So he appears in and out of games in the future. And then on the offensive line, that's where it's really a mess. At left tackle, obviously, you have DeBrickashaw Ferguson, a proven veteran, one of the Jets' longest tenured players. Him and Nick Mangold signed their extensions at the exact same time. He is going to be aging and declining in skill rapidly, so we're going to have to look at upgrading that position. And that position is probably the most important on the offensive line. So the offensive line is really going to be the downfall of this team, in my opinion. Is at left guard, you have James Carpenter at an 80 overall, and he is your third best lineman. Center is your best lineman, Nick Mangold, 91 overall. He's more than solid. He's a fantastic center, but he is going to be declining in skill over the next few years. So that is going to be another big position where we should probably draft and develop our replacement, or figure out what the future of that position is. Because Nick Mangold is making $13 million in 2017, and I'm not going to pay him that. So it's a position that should be addressed within the next couple seasons, if not in the draft after the season where he is most likely cut. So the right side is a very rough spot, as at right guard we have some rookie, Jarvis Harrison, that I had not even heard of. He's going to be starting there. And then at right tackle we got Brino Giacomini, who I personally do not like at all. I think he's a very not good offensive lineman. So that right side of the offensive line, and even like James Carpenter's not an ideal replacement or even player to have at that spot. So I'd say that the offensive line is going to be priority number 1 in the next offseason for that team to fix, along with the quarterback situation. Defense is something less to worry about. Now, we are going to miss a couple of key players. Antonio Allen to the whole season to an ACL injury, and Sheldon Richardson for the first 8 games due to NFL suspension. So it's going to be interesting when he comes back to see how the front 7 looks, because right now we have rookie Leonard Williams starting in his spot at right end, Muhammad Wilkerson, the team's franchise player at this point, who, as you'll see in a future episode, decided to sign an extension with the team for a lot of money. We'll include that in the episode during which he signed the extension after our bye week. But he is basically the team's franchise player at this point, 98 overall, one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL. And then in the middle, you got Damon Harrison. So that front three is nasty. We'll see how they see how Leonard Williams pans out and what he does when Sheldon Richardson comes back. In the meantime, though, we don't have Sheldon Richardson. So at left outside linebacker, we have Quentin Coples, who is another player. He's coming on an expiring contract, but again, he's a really weird player because he's not one of your better players, so you don't want to pay him a lot of money. But he's a solid linebacker, and you get good production out of him. You get decent production out of him, so that's good on that front. So after that, you have your middle linebackers. You got Demario Davis and David Harris. That's going to be solid for at least the next couple of years. David Harris is one of those players that I have under my on the bubble list, which I'll go over in a minute. And he's probably going to be declining soon. He's only an 82 overall to begin with anyway, but Demario Davis is definitely a great player, and we're going to have to get him under contract for the next few seasons. And then at your other outside linebacker spot, the Jets actually signed Dwight Freeney out of the free agent pool. I was trying to get Aldon Smith, but I did the preseason roster so I could do the realistic preseason cuts and stuff. And I should have done it the other way looking back now, because I accidentally played the first game with IK and whatever the hell his last name is. The guy who punched Geno Smith in the face. I accidentally had him on my team. And he actually got a sack, or he got like a tackle for a loss or something in the first week, and I was like, oh, I forgot to cut him. But we signed Dwight Freeney to fill that other linebacker spot while Sheldon Richardson is injured, and then most likely Leonard Williams is going to take over that right outside rush linebacker spot upon the return of Sheldon Richardson. So that's your front seven. At corner, you obviously have Darrelle Revis and Antonio Cromartie. Cromartie's another player who's on the bubble, a thing I'll discuss in a couple minutes. But Darrelle Revis is signed for the next 5 years. He's still in his prime at this point in his career, but he'll probably be leaving his prime even as soon as next year or the year after, maybe even this year, who knows. But he's signed. He's going to retire a Jet. I will make it sure that he retires a Jet, because I think a lot of Jets fans were not very happy to see him leave, so it'll be a nice ending to his career. It'll be like LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers, even though, well, it's actually kind of the same situation, even though the Patriots are a rival of the Jets. So, corners. Buster Skrine is a player who is I'm not happy to have on the team. He has a bad contract, he has a low overall, and I'd prefer to play Marcus Williams in the slot over him. So we'll see what he has, like his status on the team. And if he has a poor showing, don't be surprised if he is traded or cut even in the middle of the season. So, yeah, that's the corner situation. Safety, you got Calvin Pryor at the strong safety spot, more of the in-the-box safety, not really playing coverage, like high hip power, good tackle, good pursuit. He is playing that position, and he is going to be the future of that position. The other position is one that's a little shady with Antonio Allen's season-ending injury, and Marcus Gilchrist is a player that I definitely don't want on the team. He is paid way too much, and he is not good at anything besides tackling, which is kind of pointless when you can't play coverage to begin with. So I don't actually remember who we started at that other safety spot. Oh, we signed Danielle Manning, who is our punt returner and our starting free safety. So a few kind of major, I wouldn't say super major because they're not that great players. They're just stopgap players, but they are kind of important because they are having starting roles on the team. So I'm going to try and show the roster at some point during the season so I can show you guys what it looks like upon everyone's returns from injury and whatnot, besides Antonio Allen, obviously. So you can see what kind of cuts I made. I started in the preseason. I tried to start in the regular season the first time, but they cut people that I wanted to keep on the team, like Bilal Powell, and I couldn't go re-sign them because they were too lowly rated overall to show up in the running back pool. So that's our starting lineup. Cut or likely to be cut after the season. So I made a list last night. I went through and I looked at all the salaries for next season, and I decided which ones are going to kind of be cap casualties if we're a rebuilding team. If we're a building team, some of these contracts, the ones I put under on the bubble, might be fine to keep on the roster. So I'm going to go over the first list, which is cut or likely to be cut / traded, because then we can get like a 6th round or a 7th round pick or a different like replacement player, and not have to suffer with the cap penalties for the next 2 seasons. So these 3 players, I can assure you, will not be on our team next year. Buster Screen, $5.82 mil next year. Marcus Gilchrist, $5.25, and it actually goes up to $6.75 the year after that. And Brino Giacomini, $4.26 million. All of those players will be going off the Jets next season. They're definitely not being paid that money by me. That's $15 million we can use on a good crop of free agents that aren't awful like these guys are. All of them have overalls below 75, except Marcus Gilchrist, who's like a 79. But again, he's not really good at anything. Like if he was like if he was good in zone coverage or man coverage, we could find a role for him. But he's not good at anything, like at all. He's just like a good tackler, and that's about it. And then there's an on the bubble. So if we decide that we're not a contending team in this offseason, or the moves that we make in this offseason don't lead to us being a contender next year, these guys can definitely go. And this list is more of a subjective list. There's a couple players on here who might go anyway. The first part of the list is definitely more of the players who, if we are a rebuilding team, we don't need to keep around. So Brandon Marshall, $9.56 mil. Not a bad price for a number 1 receiver if we are a contending team. If we're not, we're definitely going to want someone younger. Brandon Marshall's going to be 32 at the start of the next NFL season. So that's something to watch out for. Antonio Cromartie making $8. The nice thing about Cromartie is if we want to cut him, we don't take a cap penalty, which is awesome. And he's the one I'd cut over. Obviously, you don't want to cut Darrelle Revis anyway, but Antonio Cromartie's definitely the one who would go before Darrelle Revis if I was put into kind of situation like that, where we were deciding between their salaries, because they're both, between those two, you're devoting $22 million of your cap to 2 aging corners who are not really what they used to be in their primes. I mean, Darrelle Revis is still in his prime in my mind, but he's still not as good as he once was. So that, and David Harris is the other, 7.16, another non-guaranteed deal, so you wouldn't take any cap penalty for cutting him. But those 3 players are players that don't really belong on a team that's rebuilding and reloading for the future. So they're players that I have on that list. And then the second half of this list is more players we're going to keep if we can't find better depth options, or players who just have really bad salaries that don't help the team in the long run, or if we could use the extra money, we'll probably get rid of. And one of them is James Carpenter. Now, James Carpenter is not going to last past next year if he stays on the roster, because the way Madden structures salaries is weird, because in the last 2 years of the contracts that already exist, or the last year, players get weird jumps in their salary. So DeBrickashaw Ferguson goes from making 8 mil to 13 in the last 2 years of his deal, and he's another player who's not going to stick around for that part of that deal, but I'm not going to cut him because he's still a good player right now. Nick Mangold, the same thing. He makes 6 mil the first 2 years of the contract in this franchise. The last 2 years he makes 13.5. Again, not going to stick around for those years unless we cut, negotiate a pay cut with him. So James Carpenter is definitely one of those who, if we can find a better option, we'll cut. If we don't end up needing the money, we can hold on to, though. D. Milliner, really a bust at this point, I'd say. He's injured constantly. He's not a player that I'd really like to use over Cromartie or even Marcus Williams, who's on the roster as well. So I'd say that keeping D. Milliner is not a really beneficial idea. And then Nick Folk, our kicker, not a very good kicker, at least in this game. He's making $3 million a year. Now, I know if I go out and sign a kicker, it's going to be for about the same price, but if I can get a better kicker than Nick Folk, I'm going to cut Nick Folk. So, or even if we get a rookie kicker who's just got a really strong leg and decent accuracy, and we can kind of make him a good kicker, I definitely take a flyer on that, especially if we're a rebuilding team. So I think this team is going to be a rebuilding team personally, but that's just me. I don't think we're going to win a lot of games the first year. The defense is pretty good, but Madden's defensive mechanics have always been kind of broken in my mind anyway. So, or my eyes, I guess. That wouldn't really be in my mind, because it's not something I think. That's something that's pretty well known, that the Madden defensive mechanics are broken. So the offense is going to struggle, despite Brandon Marshall, despite Eric Decker, and despite Chris Ivory's skills. They are going to be held back by the weak offensive line, especially the right side. That right side is going to give up a lot of pressure, and even James Carpenter, inside guard, is going to give up a lot of pressure, I think. So I don't predict a lot out of this team. Moonlight Swami gave a prediction of 5 to 6 wins. I might say even less. I'd probably say 4 at the most, and that's going to put us in good contention for a top 5 pick. So that's good in my mind too. I would love to win. Obviously, it's my favorite team, and I hate to see them lose. But if we can, bottom out this season and get a lot of solid picks in the draft, we can have a really good draft in GM Mike McCagnon's first draft, then I think we'll be in really good shape to make the team better in the years to come. So, thank you guys for watching. Next episode will be the first game of the season, where we will be taking on the Cleveland Browns. So, again, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoy. See you later.